Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan with another episode of the Influence Continuum. And I named this podcast because of the Influence Continuum, and people know me as a cult expert and undue influence expert, and so a lot of my stuff is focusing on the dark side of the influence continuum. But I'm so happy to introduce Julie Hartman to you, who's going to talk about ethical, positive parenting things. Julie Hartman is a certified birth doula, a certified lactation counselor, and a new parent educator. And she supports families in the perinatal period through support groups, teaching classes on living with a newborn. And most importantly, she says she's a mom to 3 adult children and can really connect with the people that she works with through shared experiences. And Julie, we sat and talked, and you were telling me about your fascinating career, and I invited you to the Influence Continuum, and I'm grateful for your willingness to share your wisdom with my audience.
Thank you so much, Steve, for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here, and of course, I think we're both going to be in a maybe in a domain that we're not used to working within. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say about your world and how our worlds interconnect and certainly support one another.
Yeah, so I'll just start by saying my wife and I adopted a 22-month-old from Ukraine, and had all kinds of medical issues that we needed to deal with, and we missed that critical first 2-year period that is so well established, that's critical for secure attachment. But you focus on that, perinatal, pregnant, not yet giving birth, to the birth, to what do you do afterward. And I just don't think the public has a clue of what to expect and what to do. And so that's why I really want you to share. And before we go too much further, I want you to explain what a doula is, what a lactation counselor is.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Let's
go. Absolutely. Yeah, I'd be happy to shout it from the mountaintops what doulas do, because I think it's a little understood, but such an important, could really play such an important role in so many people's births. I always say, I attribute this to a partner I used to have. She said that everybody deserves a doula for their birth, and there's a right doula for everybody. So it's really about connecting on personality and learning style as to connecting a doula with a birthing family. But doulas are often confused with midwives. Very, very different functionality. Midwives are highly, highly medically trained. Doulas are not, although most doulas probably could catch a baby, which I proudly say I have done several times on an emergency basis. But doulas do not have any formal medical training, whereas midwives obviously have lots and lots of medical training. Doulas are really there for both in the prenatal period and during labor, birth, and in the postpartum period, are there to really support on an emotional level, on a spiritual level, the birthing family. Really encourage through education prenatally, through lots and lots of reminders in the actual phase of labor and birth. Really empower the family to speak up for themselves, advocate for themselves, have a shared, be part of the shared decision making of birth, especially hospital birth, which there are usually decisions that have to be made along the way, and just knowing, understanding what those may be prenatally really does help in the heat of the moment.
So if I may interrupt, I'm going to be, most of my audience, I'm imagining, have questions like the ones I'm about to ask. So I'd like to ask. So doulas usually women?
Doulas are always women with there is one male doula in the United States.
Okay.
So for very obvious reasons, I'm all for it, but I really often wonder why anyone would choose to hire a male doula just because of just because of the connection you hope to have and
Okay.
And on that note, most doulas are parents themselves, whether
That
they
was my
are
next question.
have biologically birthed children or have adoptive children. Most doulas do have children.
Great.
So yeah.
And
so it's
does the
very
doula-
rare, very, very rare to have a to have a male doula, but
Great.
it
And
is
does the
it is
doula-
available if you want that.
Does the doula spend a lot of time with the father of the baby or mostly with the mom?
So in a heterosexual couple, yes, we don't call it father or mother, we call it birthing partner and
Thank
birthing
you.
person. So
Thank you.
yeah, so I would say, Steve, that a skilled doula, I don't want to say a good doula, a skilled doula will support the birthing partner to support the birthing person up and until the birthing partner needs a break from that, and then the doula can step in and be the primary person for a certain amount of time. But there is a level of secure attachment that a couple has, hopefully.
Yeah.
And that when couples have that feeling of safety and security in the presence of each other, there is a huge flood of oxytocin that is exchanged. And oxytocin is not only it's probably the most important hormone to be present so that birth can be flowing and continual and have the woman feel, or have the birthing person feel safe and secure. So we're looking for that connection that provides oxytocin surge in both the partner and the birthing person, and
so say more about oxytocin, please, for our listeners.
So oxytocin is a very important, it's often called the love hormone. People get surges of oxytocin when they're around people that they love, through touch, through words, through, oxytocin floods a person's body when they're having sex with someone that they love, when they are touched by somebody that they love. It's really skin to skin contact. That's why immediately after birth, we most doulas, and we're working on the hospitals to slow things down a little bit in the postpartum. I know we'll get to that a little later, but we recommend for oxytocin to course through mom's body. That baby is put directly skin to skin on mom's chest, birthing person's chest, right after birth, to start that connection, that bonding. Oxytocin is the catalyst for prolactin. Prolactin is the milk-making hormone. I know I'm getting way ahead of myself, but
this is definitely important. I always thought of oxytocin as a bonding or trust hormone too.
Well, it serves a myriad of purposes. Yes. Under love, we can say trust and bonding are and very, safety. Very safety and security are very important components, because I would argue without all of those, you really can't have love.
Yes.
So oxytocin is very important. So, yes, most doulas meet, just to circle back to your question about birthing partners, doulas will meet with the family prenatally, really hopefully establish a connection, a bond, an intimacy, because it's going to be the three of you in this very intimate, maybe once in a lifetime, moment in your life.
Yep.
And so that trust that partner has for the doula is really, really critical. It's critical that the doula doesn't come in and bulldoze the situation, come between the birthing person and the birthing partner, but really is there to support them in in a support role for both of them, and then tap in when the birth partner needs a little bit of a break. So that, I would say, is the definition of a well-suited doula for a particular couple, is somebody that really comes in, reads the room, has a pretty high social IQ, so that they can kind of know when to step in, when to step back, when to sit quietly, when to intervene, and when to, I would have a lot of like hand signals with my, I would use a lot of hand signals with my in my doula dynamic, so as not even to use my voice sometimes, which can be very distracting for a birthing person. We want to keep the birthing person in the flow of what she's doing. And so I was, I was no different than like a, third base coach with the, the hand signals, the ear signal, whatever, giving signals to the partner so that, they could be the person that is really there for their,
Yeah, so I can imagine, for a first-time mother, there's a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, and just to have that relationship with another woman who she knows has been through it, who can be that soothing, calming force, unlike if you're in a hospital, nurses are coming and going, and you may have different nurses with different shifts. You have a consistent support emotionally there that can lower the stress, which will be better for the baby in the long run, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that is, you're 100% spot on. And, nurses play a critical role. Most of the time when a person recounts her birth story, there's usually a nurse that shows up as being a heroine, that will, well, I shouldn't say they're not only women now. That's a crazy thing to say, that shows up as somebody that like couldn't have done it without fill in the blank, right? Which is of course not true, but the way that that nurse made that mom feel, again, safe, secure, heard, supported, understood, some sympathy, some empathy, of course goes a very long way when you're in a vulnerable moment in your life. And so, so that's what,
great. And I want to ask, you said your creds are, you're certified. So I assume there's a educational program one needs to do. Talk about that. And how many years have you been helping women give birth?
So I've been a doula for almost 20 years. I went through a training program with a certifying arm called DONA, which is Doulas of North America. So in COVID, actually, this was a really interesting thing that came up because doulas were at one moment not allowed. Any sometimes even partners weren't allowed into births during COVID, during height of COVID. Doulas certainly weren't allowed in, and so the hospitals came down with lots and lots of regulations on who could join a person in birth. So a certified doula was, you had to show all kinds of paperwork, whereas before you just walked in with your, big birth ball and you were let in because you were the doula and you were there to help. And most of the time people are happy to see doulas come into a birth scenario because honestly, it takes a lot of pressure off of the nurses in terms of support, explanation, and just presence for the birthing family.
And I would assume you've done it so many times, the hospitals know you already, or at least certain staff.
Yes. So. Exactly. I was known in my community. Absolutely. I worked in I worked in a large area. And yes, very, very, very familiar with most labor and delivery nurses in my area, certainly all the obstetrical practices.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
It was.
And you just mentioned bring your birth ball. What does that mean, a birth ball?
Birth ball is essentially a big yoga ball. I don't, if you, it's a big giant, think of a kickball, like a rubber kickball from playground days.
Yeah.
Times 20, I would say. It's a big, huge ball that is very, very supportive, comfortable for mom to sit on while she's prior to labor, while she's in labor, to sit on, to lean on, to use, to help move her hips around. Gravity is a birthing person's best friend. Being on your back in a bed is probably the place that is going to give you the least benefit to having a flowing birth. Being upright or supported in an upright position is going to allow you to birth with a lot more freedom. Giving, obviously, gravity helps the baby's head get into the right position, snuggle down into that tight space of the birth canal. Being on your back, there's all kinds of roadblocks for the baby's body and head to do what it needs to do in order to exit mom's body.
I'm glad I asked.
We
learning a lot from you, Julie, already.
Good, Steve. I'm glad. That's what I'm here for. So yeah, I mean, certainly we have all kinds of tools that we use in birth. Most hospitals these days, luckily, do have things for women to use, but you need to know about them. You need to ask for them sometimes. So that's what I'm trying to do in my communities, in the people in the community that I support, through my business, through just local outreach, just to have people be educated, know what's available, use what works for them, and just know that there are options. There's not just one way to do it. And so
that's great. So I want to ask more questions. So
please.
What are the most common issues that people do wrong in the perinatal period that you want to alert people to pay attention to? I mean, what comes to mind for me is when I see someone pregnant and they're smoking a cigarette or they're drinking.
Certainly that is not advised, yes, but most people know that by now. I mean, does it happen? Of course it does. But everybody knows that there are consequences to that in excess, of course. Mm-hmm. A glass of wine here and there, that is fine. That is not going to do any damage to your baby. Excessive drinking, over the course of the pregnancy is absolutely going to cause some neurological damage to your baby. Having a glass of wine or a beer. Beer, we know, is what's called a galactagogue. Now I'm going to put my lactation counselor hat on.
Please.
Beer is a galactagogue. That means it's a fancy word for milk promoting. So beer, in many cultures, it's totally culturally appropriate to have a dark beer with lots of malt. So think like a Guinness. In Irish culture, it is absolutely standard operating procedure for women who are lactating to have a beer a day to help promote milk production in the beginning.
So this is after birth.
This is after birth. Yep. This is after birth. So, of course, before birth, please stay away from it. Again, a glass of wine, not a problem. We're talking excess, of course, of anything is no good, really at any time.
So one more question back to, giving birth, prep for giving birth, and then we'll move on to the lactation advice. So in my mind, Lamaze classes, breathing practices were a thing. Like, what's the state of the art in the 21st century?
Great question. Breathwork is absolutely something that we go to. Lamaze is still taught. It's not as popular as it was when I was having my kids. That was sort of the de rigueur, thing that people did, mostly because there weren't as many options as there are now. But certainly breath at any time. Anybody who meditates, anybody who does yoga, anybody who does any either athletics or mindfulness knows how important breath work is. When we're holding our breath, when our body is very clenched, it's not going to release what it needs to release. What are we trying to release in birth? We're trying to release a baby, so there's a lot of work that goes into that. Of course, you mentioned before, about fear in pregnancy, anxiety in during pregnancy as pertains to the labor, the birth. There is a lot of fear out there swirling. Yep. It is certainly emphasized by media portrayals. The medical community is not unfortunately is not absolved of also their responsibility of perpetrating fear in birth. This is very, very hard to combat in my work. I do my best through my prenatal and postpartum support groups, through my business model. That is, I think information is power. I think knowing makes you feel a lot, knowing about all kinds of things across the spectrum of
Sure.
what pregnancy, labor, and birth could look like, kind of normalizes a lot of things that might come up. And so what I try to do with the families that I work with is take the fear out of it and replace that with education, with information, so that they can make choices that make the most sense for them. And again, be part of the shared decision making. And that, I think that does take some of the fear out of birth. Or at least I hope so. That's what my families tell me. So
right. And talk to me to our listeners about what happens if it's decided that there needs to be a procedure to deliver, if there's a complication or premature, and then the incubator, and how you try to navigate that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, procedures in birth are not uncommon. We call, lots of things procedures or interventions, from rupturing of membranes, which is a very scary way, I think, of what we commonly known as breaking your bag of waters, right? But rupturing of membranes sounds terrifying.
Right.
Sounds like something really bad's happening. Breaking your water, everybody's familiar with that, but the terminology, and I also teach this in my classes, in my community groups. I teach the language of what you might hear in the labor and delivery suite, so that these words, rupturing of membranes, aren't as terrifying as
it's
breaking
a natural
your water.
thing that has to happen for the baby.
Sure, it can happen naturally, or it can happen by intervention, which is a much more invasive and should be a consent-based procedure. Often it is not consent-based. This is where we come into this dilemma of shared decision-making, permission being granted for things, and doctors not just going ahead and doing the things that they think should be the next on the continuum towards birthing the baby, but letting things, I try to advocate for letting things happen in their own time, in their own way. I think less is more in birth. It is a highly healthy time of life, pregnancy, very healthy. Birth is a very, very natural thing, the most natural thing a woman's body is built to do, perfectly built to do, I should say. So, again, when there are interventions that are needed, that are medically necessitated, of course we need to go ahead and go down that avenue. What I think is most important, Steve, to really underscore is that very few interventions are emergencies. There is not a lot of urgency. Of course, sometimes, absolutely, we need to move quickly. Most of the time, however, things that happen along the continuum of labor and birth are not emergencies. We can take a moment. We can take a breath or two or three. We can have some tears if we need to. If your birth is not going how you had thought, in the movie of your life, in the movie of your birth, how you thought your birth was going to go, we need to take a moment to mourn that before we go on to how the baby is going to be born. Cesarean section obviously comes to mind for that. Lots of women are think of that as a defeat. Think of that as they couldn't do something that their body was supposed to be able to do, that they failed somehow. So, in my work as a doula, in my work as a new parent educator, what I try to get across is that this is just another way another tool we have in our toolbox for babies to be born. I like to call them belly births. That's sort of the word that we use in the doula community versus cesarean section.
Yeah.
Take a moment, deal with it for a minute, integrate it for a minute, understand it for a minute, have a couple of hugs and tears if you need them with your partner,
Right.
and then let's go. Not everything is like, most things are not, the urgency. There are very few medical emergencies in a labor scenario. When we have them, we need to move quickly. Most of the time, we can take a moment to really internalize it
and I know
have it
that
not be a shock.
I believe the ideal birth doesn't require an epidural or something, but I'm sure a lot of people need that help.
There, you know what? I would say the ideal is, what is an ideal birth?
Right.
Epidurals are fantastic tools. I am totally for epidurals if that is what the woman wants.
Right.
I believe there is a difference, Steve, between pain and suffering. Pain
is expected.
Pain is expected. Everybody has at some point in their life felt what physical pain feels like on some level. Maybe not to the extreme that labor demands of us and has us understanding what pain is, but you don't know what you can handle. Right. I try to really educate my families on, sit in the wonder of it. It's there for a reason. Our bodies are perfectly meant to give birth.
Right.
Let's understand why the pain might be necessary. Let's really wrap our heads around what's happening in our bodies. This is why I do a lot of work prenatally with women on what's happening anatomically. Let's understand and really, be amazed at why the pain is necessary to expel a baby from our body, right? So I really counsel people, again, to sit in the wonder of what their body is doing and not question it so much, not fear it so much. And maybe you can handle more than you think you can. In my work, in my estimation, if an epidural is in your birth plan, you are thinking when you're sitting in your living room and you're 20 weeks pregnant and you're 30 weeks pregnant and you're 35 weeks pregnant that you think you're going to want to have an epidural, absolutely have that. Again, pain is one thing, suffering is another thing. We don't want suffering. We have tools to make it a non-suffering experience. Let's use them if we need them. There is a sweet spot. There is a time in the birth continuum, in the labor continuum, that in my estimation is a time to shoot for, to get to, and that is that like 5 to 6 centimeters of dilation, of cervical dilation. You've used gravity for a long time by then. Your body is very much in the flow of labor by then. And, and it is getting quite painful, maybe bordering on suffering by then. So, but everybody has a different idea of what that means. So we have to respect that it is, it's different for every woman. And,
sure. So I want to interject, if I may, my one experience that was life-changing for me. It took place about 40 years ago. So I'm listening to this and it's registering what was 40 years ago. But a friend was going to give birth, and she knew I had studied hypnosis, and she had heard that hypnotherapy could reduce pain.
Yeah.
And so I taught her some self-hypnosis techniques, and I thought that was all really cool. Then I get a call. I'm in labor. Please come to the house. She wanted to deliver at home. Dropped everything, and I wound up almost 2 days with Susanna and delivered Sam, cesarean, I'll add. But in any case, I was helping her in between contractions to like go to a happy place where the pain, because the pain was a signal that the birth was happening, so she didn't need to feel it all the time, and she could get a little rest in between. What I didn't know back then was I should have been also giving suggestions about dilation and opening flowers and other kinds of things like that. I was mostly focusing on the pain aspect. In any case, we wound up going to the hospital, and they put a fetal heart monitor on, a monitor for her, and the doctors were amazed how good her heart rate was given, and the baby's heart rate was given how long she had been in labor. And they wanted to then do a cesarean, but there were other emergencies, so they kept putting it off because there was no fetal distress.
Right.
But they weren't on a ball. She wasn't on a ball. She was in a bed, and I wound up. I remember having to press her back a lot.
Yeah, good
she
for
was
you.
In so much pain. Of course, the father, the birth partner, was there too. But I was, I guess, acting in a form of what you do.
You were a doula, Steve.
But then I was in this operating room, and the curtain was there, and I'm watching her being opened, and I'm talking to her about walking through beautiful fields of wildflowers, and she's smiling, and I think they gave her an epidural, but I don't even remember. But I'm watching the birth of this beautiful child. I mean, beautiful. His head was kind of pointy and kind of shrivelly. And when we last were together, you were talking about how parents are not prepared for how their kids are going to look initially.
Yeah.
And anyway, I'm done with my story, but I just want to say, I just think that it's such a high, your job, to be part of this miraculous birth experience. I can only imagine you get such fulfillment.
It is. I feel like the luckiest person in the world. Being present at a birth. First of all, it's such an honor, right?
Exactly.
It's like something that it's such an intimate, personal thing. When you get to the hospital, there are lots of people around. But if you're, laboring with a couple in their home, it's usually just the three of you. It's quiet. It's intimate. It's intense. You're working together. It is an honor. It really is an honor. And the word fulfilling is exactly right, because what could be more beautiful than to help bring a life into the world, and hopefully help the parents to start out this amazing relationship, this lifelong relationship with some confidence. My business is called Nest Assured with Julie, and my tagline is turning people into confident parents. So that's what I try to do. I try to help people become confident parents, because confident parents raise confident children, and we all know how that goes, right? So
let's dive into it. The birth is happening.
Yeah.
Walk us through what you teach, some of the elements, and Julie teaches courses, so if you are pregnant or have a friend or family member pregnant, know that Julie exists, and you do courses online as well as in person.
I do everything online. Yeah, my business is called Nest Assured with Julie. Anybody who's listening can find me at nestassuredwithjulie.com.
Yeah, we'll put it all
on the blog. Contact me there. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
Totally.
But my classes start. My class on living. So in my work as a doula, obviously lots and lots of time, education, and emphasis was placed on pregnancy, labor, birth. And then everyone kind of forgot that they also had to bring this baby home with them, right? So I teach a class called Nest Assured, which is about living with a 0 to 3 month old. So from the moment your baby is born, literally, you alluded to it before, what does a newborn baby even look like? In my work as a doula, I experienced far too many people going, you're like, "Ooh," the pointy head. There's a lot of stuff. There's stuff all over the baby. There's blood potentially. There's lots of fluid, birth fluids. Things
Sure.
are a bit of can be quite. It's not the like Gerber baby, that comes out wrapped up in a beautiful swaddle.
Right.
So I'm very candid about that, of course, because I don't want anybody to start off this lifelong relationship going like
Right.
that. I want everybody to be kind of prepared about what a newborn baby could look like.
Right.
So that I start there, Steve, and I try to, information is power. If you know, and it's a normal thing and it normalizes it, then you start off feeling okay. This is okay. This is common. This is what I'm anticipating,
Right.
and therefore, there's not a lot of, surprise to it.
Right. So talk about lactation and do's and don'ts. You taught me something
Sure.
about dark beer and Irish is like,
Sure,
whoa,
dark beer. Yeah, absolutely. In moderation again, but yes. So once your baby is born, I always encourage to start that bonding, which is so important. Start that bonding right away. We know that from a brain chemistry point of view, women, moms, birthing person, brain chemistry changes along the course of her pregnancy.
Sure.
Through what we call, there's a great term there's a great kind of field of study now that actually has a name. Hallelujah. It's called Matrescence. I don't know if you've ever heard that
Nope.
that word, Matrescence. It sort of sounds like adolescence. Matrescence is literally becoming a mother. The season of your life that you become a mother. There's a lot of new study on that. It actually. There's some really interesting TED Talks. I can send you some links for those. You can
Great.
add them about really what's happening to the birthing person, what's happening to the mom in the process of becoming a mother. Her body is changing. Her skin is breaking out. She's having hormonal headaches. She is not, she doesn't recognize herself. Her mood swings are kind of all over the place. Sounds like adolescence, right? Everybody understands what that's like. Well, matrescence sort of is like that too. You're learning this. You're moving to a new phase, a new chapter that comes with lots of responsibility, that comes with lots of permissions, that comes with lots of new and expected behaviors of you that maybe you're not really ready to understand or embrace. And people think they should feel that right away. They should feel, if your baby's in your arms, you should feel like a mother right away. And if you don't, there's something wrong with you. If you don't, you're not bonding with your baby. If you don't, you're having postpartum depression. If you don't, you're not meant to be a mother. Well, that's just patently untrue. This is something that takes time. It takes evolution. It takes learning and understanding. And that can happen for the mom during the course of the pregnancy. I suggest starting skin to skin right after birth, or as immediately after birth as you can get it if your baby is born via C-section, belly birth. Just get your baby on your skin as soon as you possibly can. And get that connection started. Will you maybe not feel, that surge of love, that bonding, that, that totally wide-eyed feeling that we see in movies? You might not. And that's okay. And that's normal too. And that, because it takes time. And, these things are the things that are worth it take time. And so, to just understand that there is a timeline sometimes on this connection, on this bonding. For men, we know men don't experience that that brain chemistry change until the moment that they see their babies born. Once a man sees his baby born, there is a huge chemical shift in his brain. If it's a man, it's usually a huge surge of testosterone, even if it's a woman, also a huge surge of testosterone, that protective, that a little bit aggressive, like don't come near my family. Don't forget, we are our cave. I always say this in my classes. We are our cave people self, right? We all had to be running away from the woolly mammoth. We weren't all laying in a hospital bed,
right,
getting like lavender foot massages. Cave people gave birth and they had to run. They had to protect their baby. The woolly mammoth or the saber-toothed tiger was right on their tail. So the men typically had to be the protector.
Right.
Women had to have a big surge of, lots of times women right after they give birth, they shudder, they shake. We often, I think it's a really interesting anthropological question. Why does this happen? A lot of it is explained from adrenaline that has been really coursing through your body, kind of coming down and simmering down after the baby is born. A lot of people explain it as it has to be this kind of, you shake your body, your brain has to shake awake a little bit, because the last phase of birth is very, very inward. It's very intense for the woman, the pushing phase. So there's a very, very inward it's an inward moment, chapter of the birthing process. So that shaking kind of awakes the woman to the fact that her baby is here, her baby is on her. And also it's such a tectonic change in your life. There has to be a physical manifestation of, I was that 30 seconds ago and now I'm this.
Yeah.
Because birth, that's what birth does, right? It changes you at your core. So
I'm a little,
so it's
I'm a
very
little envious as a guy. That
yeah,
guys can't have this experience. I don't know.
I don't know that every woman would concur that, I think a lot of women wish men could give birth, but yeah, I don't blame you. You should be jealous. It is a pretty
awesome thing.
It's a pretty incredible thing to be able to do. And, my job is to help women recognize how incredible it is to give birth.
Yeah.
And not that it's a chore or a have to, but you get to. You're allowed to, because you have the body parts to be able to do it.
Yep. So let me ask a couple of other, observations or just ideas that are flowing from this conversation.
Sure.
So I have to, you said you like the skin touch, but I have to imagine the child hearing your heartbeat, smelling you smelling the child. And I have to imagine a lot of people will be talking to their baby or singing to their babies. Talk a little bit more about that and what the birth partner can do in those early moments.
For sure. Absolutely. So we like to, I like to encourage people to use all their senses, especially their voice, which you really hit the nail on the head. Babies, their sense of hearing is the most developed at birth. We know that babies start to be able to hear at about 5 months of gestation. And so they already are familiar with their mother's voices. They are already pretty familiar with their father's voices, if that's the voice that they hear most, second to their mother's, or their, they hear music, they hear, of course, all the body sounds that are going on inside in utero. Mom's blood is flowing, mom's heart is beating, gases are moving around, voices, environmental sounds. So babies live in a very noisy environment. That's why when a babe, we recommend a sound machine in the presence of wherever the baby's going to be sleeping to help soothe the baby. And what do we do? Let me grab a little baby here. What do we do when we have a baby in our arms? What do? We don't just stand there. We go, shh.
And you rock back and forth.
You rock back and forth, right? That's what we're naturally coded to do. That's total learned behavior on the part of human beings. Because why? Because babies soothe to movement. Babies soothe to shh, repeated rhythmic sound, because that's what was going on in utero.
I never knew that. That's so fascinating.
Yes,
of course,
babies,
that makes sense.
babies. When we're trying to soothe the baby, we're not holding the baby out here, right? We're tucking the baby in. Sometimes we swaddle a baby, which has the baby's arms and legs tucked in, because babies flail. Babies are used to being in very tight spaces. So to soothe the baby, we want to recreate that womb-like environment for them in order to help them soothe and quiet down. Babies need touch. Babies need touch. It's part of how we develop secure attachment. So that skin to skin, which we talked about before, which you just asked me about, so important. That's that kind of touch they need. They also just need being held, being stroked, being reassured. We know that babies that are born into orphanages, for instance, who do not have access to lots and lots of touch, later on in life, really have trouble sometimes bonding, attaching, trusting, and so that is something that we know about children that have that kind of beginning to their life.
Yeah, neglect. A lot of my clientele who are born in cults, that it's not done properly, not proper medical support, and the kid is, the child is often treated like an object even, or treated like an adult. Farmed off to somebody else, and people exit and they're like, I don't know who I am, and I don't know who I can trust. And the good news is people can learn how to rewire their neurons. And
that's where you come in, which is wonderful. But how much better off would we be if we got that right from the get-go? Through the power of touch, through the power of our voices, familiarity. I tell people all the time, people say, why am I going to read a newborn baby a book? Why am I going to sing to a newborn baby? Or why am I going to talk to a newborn baby? Babies, their sense of hearing is the most developed at birth. They are familiar with our voices. We want to use our voices as a tool, right? So that they know if they can hear our voice, they are safe and secure. If they're on the other side of the room asleep in the bassinet and they wake up and we haven't heard them stirring or whatever, and they cry to us, on the way over, to the baby, Mommy's on her way. I'll be right there. I'm coming. I love you. I'll be right there to you. I'll be right there for you. I'm coming. And hearing that, they can begin to soothe. So those really alert, on guard, hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, that happen when babies cry, can start to soothe down at in the presence of somebody that they know, somebody that they know and trust.
Right.
In the presence of their voice, they know they can start to calm and soothe to that. So great to read, great to sing, great to, do a monologue of your day. I mean, people tell me I feel crazy. I'm just talking to my baby, I'm going to the refrigerator, I'm taking something out of the refrigerator, I'm pouring myself some water, I'm putting the water bottle back in the refrigerator, but this is what babies need. This is what they need to hear, first of all, for language development. Well, secondly, for language development, first for establishing, security and
I would imagine it's
confidence.
Good for the parent to have that relationship where they're already interacting. So is it true that breastfeeding is so important if you can do it? And
absolutely,
because of hormones, because of antibodies, and talk about
so
that.
We say, I will say, fed is best. Whatever way you need to feed your baby, you want to feed your baby, whatever works for you is also going to be fine for your baby. However, we know there are so many benefits to breast milk. starting with colostrum, which mom starts making in her breast tissue during her pregnancy. It is available to the baby in the first moments of the baby's life. Colostrum is where all the antibodies are, all the immune factor is, and most importantly for newborns, all the white blood cells, because babies, again, are prehistoric selves, right? Let's not forget we were out in the on the veldt not too long ago. White blood cells, what do? They fight infection. Babies were very susceptible to dying of infection because they were not living in clean sanitary environments. Nowadays, our babies are born into much more sanitary conditions. Nonetheless, the colostrum does provide a great base for fighting infection, sets up the gut microbiome for better digestion of food later on in life. And we know that colostrum transitions to mature milk around day 3 or 4 of the baby's life. Mature milk has the perfect combination of proteins, fats, hormones, minerals, vitamins, immunofactors. And what's so cool, Steve, is that breast milk is perfectly curated for that baby on that feed on that day of that baby's life. It changes composition based on the information that mom's brain is getting from the baby's saliva through the mammary glands. So it changes composition. If baby is going to go start into a growth spurt, well, the proteins go up, the fats go up.
Fascinating.
It's so cool. If a
that.
baby starts, if the information comes to mom's brain that there's a little bit of shift in the blood cell, in the white blood cells, maybe baby's starting to get a cold or fighting off a stomach bug or something. Well, up go those white blood cells in the breast milk so that the baby can help fight off whatever it might be. Women are really trying to breastfeed, especially through this season right now where we're experiencing COVID, we're experiencing RSV, which is really a big problem for babies right now. It's coming down a little bit right now, thankfully, but in the fall, late fall and early winter, November and December, RSV was rampant. Lots of babies were getting very sick. Women were desperate to maintaining their breastfeeding relationships because of the protection that it can afford a newborn and really any age baby. So breastfeeding, of course, has so many benefits to mom and baby.
So
I could go on. That's like a whole nother thing, Steve. That's like almost too much to unpack.
May need to do a part 2. We have about 10, 15 minutes, but I really want to ask about sleep and old recommendations for sleep. Let your kid cry, and so they learn how to be independent. You're shaking your head for our podcast
shaking my
listeners.
Head. Yes, I'm shaking my head about that. We do not recommend that anymore. There is that idea of secure attachment that we have been alluding to. We know that is parents' most important job in the first 3 months of their baby's life. The first 3 months is critical. Brain development is exponential at that time.
Right.
The baby is really ripe for setting down setting down the foundation for secure attachment in the first 3 months of their life. It is so important, so critical. Again, no pressure, but literally every single relationship that the child has for the rest of her life will really be predicated on how she is treated, how secure attachment is established in the first 3 months of her life. It is a huge concept. It seems like a lot of pressure on parents, but in reality, and it is in a way, but in reality, it's very easily accomplished. We accomplish it by responding to our babies, our children, in a timely fashion, right? So that means no excessive, not letting them excessively cry, and with love and with kindness, with a soothing voice, with a calm voice, not yelling, not raising our voices. So we watch for our baby's cues. babies will cue us about all the things that they need, which aren't that many. They need to be fed. They need to be, they need to be kept clean. They need to have, they like, a certain body temperature, not too cold, not too hot. They're tired, sleep. They need our help to sleep. So babies really, contrary to popular belief, sleeping like a baby is a total misnomer. Babies are terrible sleepers. They need our help to know that they are safe. Again, the woolly mammoth is coming at any moment. They need our help to be able to have those alert hormones, that cortisol, that adrenaline, be at their lowest.
Great.
So that they can drift off to sleep. When are those hormones at their lowest? When they're on us or when they're near us.
So does that mean sleeping in the bed with mom is a good idea?
So great question. That is not, the American Academy of Pediatrics does not encourage what we call bed sharing, which is where the baby is sleeping on the same surface as the parents. Rather, we suggest, the American Academy of Pediatrics likes to call it room sharing. So baby is in the same room, but not on the same bed surface, sleep surface as the parents. So most parents will have a bassinet or a little sidecar kind of thing attached, that's very close to their bed. So the baby can be very close. The baby can smell the parents, hear the parents, someone can always reach over and touch the baby, for reassurance or whatever. And the baby is close by. That is where babies will sleep, the best when they want to be separated. Generally, a newborn doesn't want to be put down. So so often people will say to me, the baby was sound. I fed the baby. I burped the baby was sound asleep. I went to put the baby down and the baby, the baby's now awake.
Right.
And this is, babies don't like to sleep separate from us. They want to sleep on us or near us. So, we know that, I'm digressing a little bit, but the American Academy of Pediatrics has a public health initiative. It started in the mid-90s. It's called the Back to Sleep campaign. We know since we initiated the Back to Sleep campaign that SIDS, or SUID, sudden unexpected infant death syndrome, has completely plummeted. I'm very happy to share that only, I shouldn't say only, 1/10 of 1% of all live births will succumb to a SIDS death, which is tremendous. Which is fantastic change.
In the right direction.
And we attribute that to the Back to Sleep campaign. We put babies to sleep on their back for every sleep, and on a proper sleep surface. Does that mean that, I really try to normalize, having baby sleep on you? Again, baby is going to be most comfortable, most soothed to get to sleep, being on or near somebody that loves her. And so that's that is something that babies learn as they mature neurologically. So in the first 3 months of your life, you can count on holding your baby quite a bit. Again, you need it. Your baby needs it. That's where secure attachment sets up. Everything, there's a reason for everything. None of the things that babies manifest are by accident. There's a reason for everything. It's really important to understand that and to really, again, sit in the wonder of what is happening, because if you think about it, you decode, you unpack it, you ask an expert, there is a reason for all infant behaviors.
So, approximately how many times will a newborn need to be fed throughout the night? And what do parents do if they feel sleep deprived and they get cranky?
Great question. So infants in the first several weeks of their life need to be fed, again, with my lactation counselor hat on, and this goes for breast or bottle fed babies, about 12 times a day. So that equates to, obviously, about every 2 hours. So I'll speak about breastfeeding for a moment, establish the milk supply, to establish that the supply meets the demand of the baby. The breast tissue needs to be stimulated to give the brain the information that it needs. We know that draining the breasts about every 2 hours will start that cycle of information going, will assure that mom's supply meets baby's demand. So yeah, every 2 hours, in the first several weeks of the baby's life, certainly until the baby surpasses birth weight, we want the baby to be fed every couple of hours, and again, as that breast milk supply is being developed. Once the baby has surpassed birth weight and is, maybe sleeping, a couple of, maybe 3 hours in the overnight period. I always say, babies, once they get their 24-hour caloric needs met during what is considered to be our daytime, they will start to sleep longer overnight.
That's interesting.
But in the first weeks of their life, there is no such thing as day and night. Although another amazing, mind-blowing, incredible breast milk fact is that between 3 p.m. and 3 a.m., mom's milk will have more melatonin in it in order to help the baby organize day and night and have the baby be soothed for, longer overnight sleep. And the quality of breast milk, it's thicker, it's heavier from breast milk made from 3 a.m. So 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. is considered daytime in my work. 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. is considered nighttime. So daytime milk is thicker. It's more calorically rich. Nighttime milk is a little bit thinner, easier to digest, therefore less digestive issues in the overnight when baby is more likely to be, to be laying down.
So I am aware that some women use breast pumps to store some milk, and then their partner can trade off and feed the infant. Talk a little bit about that. We're going to need to wrap up in a few minutes, but this is fascinating.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, breast pumps are a great tool when used at the right time for the right reason. We often go to the breast pump a little too early, in my estimation. But yes, pumping milk, the breast pump, if for those that are not familiar, it's like it's like
a vacuum
almost like a
device,
a funnel that fits on over the mother's breast tissue, areola, and nipple, and has a vacuum function to it, and kind of stimulates the breast in the same way that the baby's sucking motion does, although not really, because pumps are not as good pumpers as babies are suckers. Babies get much more milk out of the breast than pumps do, which is really important to know, because we can't see what we're feeding our baby from the breast.
Right.
We just have to trust, and there's lots of markers, and we can again go into that in a part B if you'd like. Yeah. But pumps, there is that visual confirmation that I am making milk, I am providing for my baby. There is a lot of validation there for women. Or on the flip side, if you don't seem like you're making an abundant amount of milk, it could really kind of mess with you and make you feel like you're not doing what you want. But it's a great tool, sure, for the partner to be able to take some of the responsibility of the feeding. That can be very heavy for mom, that she is the one and only sole source of nutrition for the baby if they're choosing to exclusively breastfeed or feed breast milk. Yeah. But it's no easier, some people, if they can breastfeed, find that breastfeeding is just so much easier than dealing with pump parts and setting it up and finding a time and sanitizing and storing and freezing and then sanitizing the bottle and then heating up the bottle, and now the baby's crying while the bottle is heating. It's a lot easier to take your shirt up and put your baby on your breast, and it's always clean, it's always the right temperature, and it's always there. So, there is this idea that, I just want my partner to be able to feed my baby, I need a break from it, but there's so many other so many other components to it, of
Right.
course, that people don't always take into account. But
That-
that's what I try. That's what
Sure.
I like I said, information is power. Knowing that you have choices and options is very liberating. Whether they actually are easier for you is, obviously a personal choice. But
and
I always contend there's lots and lots of other things that dad or partner can do. Take over. You can change every single diaper. You can do every bath time.
I
You
did
can,
it.
Yeah,
A lot of
exactly. I
them,
mean,
anyway.
feeding, yeah, of course. I mean, feeding is only one thing. Babies
Right.
need our help with a lot of things. So,
Right.
So there's a lot to do.
So we're going to need to wrap up. This has been
Sure.
fantastic. I just want to comment, listening to you, it seems clear that if you have a newborn and you're out and about, you should be carrying them in a pouch on your chest instead of in a baby
wearer, yep.
carriage.
Sure, yep.
So they have the
That is
warmth
very, yep,
and hear
yep,
the
the warmth.
heartbeat, and you can
Yep.
talk to your baby.
Yep, that is what babies love. I mean, look, babies love being in strollers too, but when they're little, and also for, like you said, body temperature regulation,
Yeah.
keeping them close, especially now with COVID and germs and RSV and all that, when people prefer to have their baby, there is sort of like a natural, like, okay, you stay over there, you can talk
Right.
to me, but I don't want your germs on my baby, as opposed to somebody kind of leaning over a stroller and,
Right.
a lot of times there's not there. It's a little bit more comfortable.
So,
in
Julie
public.
Hartman, I've learned a lot, and I want to give you the last summary words.
The last word?
Yeah.
Yeah. The last word is educate yourself, guys. Educate yourself. Know and understand what the reasons for why they act the way they do. It's not for no reason. They don't just cry to drive us crazy and be malicious. They cry because they need something from us. They need us to help them with something. I mean, our babies are born as needy beings. We're not giraffes in the wild, that get up and run away. Our babies need help from us, and it is our job as parents to provide that to the best of our abilities. Certainly learning beforehand, before your baby's born, why babies act the way they do, how they act, knowing and anticipating can make that whole bonding process smoother, more easy to understand, and really, really take a little, again, there should not be fear around birth. There should not be fear around parenting, although yes, can it be, can there be moments of it? Of course. But let's try to, do the work, do a little bit of work before to make that transition into this glorious but vulnerable new chapter in your life a little bit more seamless.
Thank you. So nestassuredwithjulie.com is your website. And
it is.
I'm just really appreciative of you sharing your wisdom and knowledge. And
you're welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful, and I really appreciate your listeners. Your listeners listening.
Yeah. So the future is our children, and understanding how to raise securely attached children. Mm-hmm. It gives them that foundation for healthy adult development. And when they don't have that, then a lot of what happens is compensation strategies that can manifest in not so healthy ways. It's nowadays more fixable because we understand more just how neuroplasticity works and neurogenesis works. But thank you so much for doing what you do and being who you are, Julie.
You're welcome, and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your time today, and I appreciate the chance to speak to your listeners.
Pleasure. Take care.
Bye.